talk today a little bit about some of the generative artwork that I've been doing over the past, 25 years or so. And in particular, I'm going to talk about computed paintings. So when I say computed paintings, I use the term computed paintings to describe images that are generated by some relatively simple algorithmic processes involving no user input and no random data generation to generate the final image. That is, the algorithm fully describes the image that you get out at the end. Now, of course, there are many ways that one could generate computed paintings based on this definition, and I've explored a few of them. One of the most interesting that I've found is based on the idea of sequential geometric transformations of simple starting forms or simple starting shapes. And as I said, this is a project I've been working on for a long time. In particular, the geometric transformations methodology dates back to probably 2002 when I started really discovering that the variety of things that can be achieved with this kind of approach. And so in this talk, I'll show how images as varied as the ones shown here can be generated from a single family of equations and a single sort of approach to an algorithm, and how I ended up generating over 300,000 such images and reviewing 300,000 such images over about a 5-year period of fairly intensive work on this. So just taking a step back, what do I mean by a geometric transformation? As many of you will know, a geometric transformation just maps points on a graph, if you will, or in a shape from one location to another. So shown here, ironically, France is the example that's on Wikipedia. You can do a reflection of the image of France, and by doing so, which you can describe with the parametric equation shown here at the bottom, and by doing so, you change the orientation of the shape that you started with, right? So you map the points on the left-hand side to the right-hand side. And as for all geometric transformations, reflection has a characteristic effect on the shapes that were present in the starting image. Certain aspects of the geometry are preserved, in this case almost all of them, with the exception of orientation, which is changed. And other, as I said, other aspects of the geometry or the geometric features are altered. So this kind of simple transformation, a reflection, preserves what we would normally think of as the symmetry of the image as well. And we'll come back to symmetry, preservation versus destruction or changing of symmetries. Now, you can see geometric transformations quite frequently in decorative arts, right? You encounter this all over the place. You see motifs being translated and repeated to decorate the borders of images. You see rotations. Sometimes they're slightly hidden, but if you think about it, you can see a rotation such as this, where the upper image is rotated to give the lower. And you can see reflections. This is a picture I took down in the 7th arrondissement of a nice building. So this kind of approach of taking a motif and repeatedly modifying it by some simple geometric transformation certainly fits into what's normally considered part of art, or the decorative arts at the very least. And sometimes you get slightly more complex transformations. If you look around, this lower right-hand image is one that I found as part of a China pattern at the second-hand store the other day. And this one actually is an affine transformation, so it's changing the size of the whole motif, as well as rotating it as it moves from place to place in the design. So still, though, those are fairly simple geometric transformations. There are more complex ones out there. And as illustrated on the bottom, you can stretch and distort an image in lots of different ways with this approach. So another one of these geometric transformations that is pretty well known, sort of high school level mathematics, that is one of my particular favorites and is heavily used in the work I'm going to show you, is the polar coordinate transformation. So the polar coordinate transformation converts the Cartesian coordinate system to the polar coordinate system, so that in this particular instantiation, horizontal lines become rays emanating from the center of the image, and horizontal lines become circles, vertical lines become rays. You can do it the other way around if you tweak the mathematics. And so the equation is shown at the bottom of the slide for how you can produce this kind of a transformation. Now this one has a very different profile of what geometric properties are maintained or altered when you put a particular shape or an image through this coordinate transformation, right? Distances between points certainly altered, orientations certainly altered, angles between lines, well, it depends on what lines you're talking about. Some are preserved and some are maintained, right? The axes are still perpendicular, where in Cartesian coordinates, you're talking about horizontal and vertical. Here, you're talking about circular and radial, but still perpendicular to each other at all points. Okay, so if you take that concept, the repetition of motifs and the application of sequential geometric transformations, you can play around with that, and you can take something like a circle and apply multiple instances of the geometric transformation to that. And I spent a long time sort of enjoying the possibilities there and making lots of different images from different starting motifs and different sort of visualizations, some of which are shown here. So you can play with rotating the motif when it's been partially transformed and things like this. So here's a few examples of some of the early work that I did here. Here's another one where the motifs are overlapped in the final image. But again, you can see, if you look carefully, the application of the polar coordinate transformation having stretched and distorted some fairly simple starting shapes. If you add some sort of identifiable motif like this six-branched star that's shown in this one, it sort of highlights how this original image, which was very simple, symmetrical, radially symmetrical motif, gets transformed through the application of these transformations over and over again. Okay, so that's polar coordinate transformation and maybe a little bit of rotation or reflection. Those are kind of nice. There are some close relatives to the polar coordinate transformation that one can bring into play as well. So if you start with the checkerboard pattern, labeled number 1 in this image, you can apply the polar coordinate transformation and you get image number 2. You can apply the inverse polar coordinate transformation, which is just the reverse process, as you'd expect, to get image number 3. And we'll skip number 4 for now, but you can also do what's called a circle inversion sometimes to get image number 5, again, directly from image number 1. And it turns out that image number 5 is also the result of executing an inverse polar coordinate transformation, so getting to image number 3, flipping the image vertically, and then applying the polar coordinate transformation. So undoing the polar coordinate transform, having flipped the image in between, you end up with image number 5. And so that, again, is a theme that informed a lot of the later work, that if you first do one of these symmetry breaking operations and then do some symmetry preserving operations and finally undo the symmetry breaking operation, you end up with an image that has a relationship with the original but is certainly different. And so, again, working with some of these transformations to sort of with free-form application and starting with manually selected images, we get to some images like this, that some of which are shown in the gallery, in the exhibit that's in the tubes in the buildings here, between the buildings here. And obviously there's a family of things based on this particular motif and color scheme and so on. So this is a result of sort of a distorted circle inversion. And so one can spend a lot of time enjoying that kind of work. But sort of the computer science scientist part of me wanted to do sort of a more systematic exploration of what are the possibilities of this kind of geometric operation, right? So for example, if you take something as simple as a square with a white border, a black square with a white border, and you repeatedly apply the polar coordinate transformation to that shape, what you get ultimately in the limit of this operation is the attractor of this equation, of this function, right? So repeated operation here, we're showing this sort of dead Pac-Man on his back is the first application of polar coordinate transform. The second application adds another involution and so on until eventually we end up at the what approximates the attractor of this function on the right-hand side. Similarly, for the inverse function, here we're starting with a white square with a black border, but the same process can be done where doing the inverse polar coordinate transform repeatedly leads eventually through these sort of plant-like images to something that again shows in now white where the attractor for this image or for this function lies. Now, one of the things that you'll notice here is that with repeated application of the same transformation over and over and over again, we get the characteristic spirals and self-similarity that you see in fractals, where, again, you're applying sort of the same function an infinite number of times in that case, or at least theoretically infinite number of times, and you get that characteristic self-similarity and spiral activity. And that's nice, but I don't know, it's kind of sterile in my mind.